After Dad dies, you can't stay here. That's what my son said. 3 days after the funeral, not a week, not even a full 72 hours since I placed my hand on the cold lid of the casket and whispered goodbye to the man I'd built my life around. We were still in black. His shirt was Chris. Mine was stained under the arms from grief and rain. The house smelled like funeral lilies and stale coffee. A casserole sat untouched on the counter, sweating under plastic wrap. He didn't look at me when he said it. He just stood by the fridge, arms crossed, voice tight, like it was an item on a to-do list he'd waited too long to check off. You can't stay here after Dad dies. Not now that Dad's gone. Not, maybe we should talk about what happens next. Not, how are you holding up, Mom? Just those words, like a line rehearsed in a mirror, over and over again, until the feeling had drained out of them completely. I don't remember if I nodded or just blinked. I didn't ask where I would go. I didn't ask who he was, though I could guess. It was her, always her, my daughter-in-law Sarah, who rearranged my spice cabinet without asking, who told me softly, sweetly, that maybe I shouldn't wear so much beige, who clutched her purse a little tighter around me, though I'd never taken a thing from anyone in my life. She means well, my husband used to say. Well, maybe. But kindness doesn't roll its eyes when you enter a room. I walked out onto the porch. The afternoon was quiet. The sky cracked open with soft light, the grass slick from the burial. I leaned against the railing, the one Paul built with those hands of his, thick and strong and gentle, and I felt something sharp push against my ribs. Not pain, exactly. Something deeper. Something cold. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My tears had dried up somewhere between the eulogy and the after-service finger sandwiches. What struck me most, more than the betrayal, more than the timing, was the speed with which they'd erased me. As if the moment Paul's heart stopped, the deed changed hands. The matriarch died with him. And what remained was something inconvenient, something to be boxed up and moved out. He didn't offer a timeline. He didn't offer help. He didn't ask if I had a plan. Just the sentence, like a sentence in court. After Dad dies, you can't stay here. I stood in that house for 2 more days. I made tea that I didn't drink, folded laundry I didn't need, answered the door for mourners who no longer knew what to say. I'm so sorry for your loss. Which one? Because the second one was still breathing, and it hurt worse than the first. Paul had gone softly, even in death. His fingers curled around mine until they loosened like leaves falling from a tree. He left with dignity, with love. But my son, he took something harder with him. He took the illusion, the story I'd held in my chest like a talisman that love given would be love returned. That care, invested in others, would come back to me when I needed it most. I couldn't sleep in our bed that night. I lay down on the living room sofa, my husband's old flannel blanket pulled over my shoulders, and stared at the ceiling fan. It was still dusty, though I'd cleaned it twice that week. Funny the things we cling to when the ground under us shifts. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the sound of Paul's laugh, but all I could hear was the hum of the fridge and the silence between rooms, and a sentence that wouldn't leave my head. After Dad dies, you can't stay here. I used to believe that devotion was enough, that if you poured yourself into something, a marriage, a home, a child, it would return to you like sunlight through a window pane. I thought I was building something solid, something eternal. I met Paul in the spring of 1978. He had oil under his fingernails and calluses on his hands. A man who could fix a leaky faucet and quote Neruda in the same breath. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. He paid attention to small things, the way I took my tea, how I folded my letters before slipping them into envelopes, how I never left the house without lipstick, even if it was just to the market. We married fast, not reckless, fast soul, fast. And when our son came, I thought I understood what it meant to give everything. I held that child like he was made of light. I cut crusts off sandwiches, kissed scraped knees, stayed up with fevers and night terrors. We built the house the year our son turned 3. Paul worked overtime, and I started night shifts at the clinic until the baby could sleep through. We couldn't afford a contractor, so we did it ourselves. I painted those walls with one arm while cradling a teething baby in the other. It was never a question I stayed home. Paul kept working, and I became the one who knew where every receipt was, what night the trash went out, and how to quiet our son's sobs when the dark scared him. I gave up nursing after my license expired. Just 1 year off, then another. Then the years blended, and I stopped worrying. I'll not saying I'll go back. I didn't resent it. Not then. I believed in the family we were shaping. I believed in the long game, that when my knees ached and my hair thinned, someone would say, "You did well, Mom. Let us carry you now." But Paul got sick earlier than we expected. First it was his memory, then his strength, then his voice. I became a caregiver in the full sense of the word, lifting him into tubs, changing sheets, managing meds, hiding my fear behind a smile. Our son came around more often at first, brought Sarah, who stood in the corner with her phone, and offered politely distant condolences. They never stayed long. The house, she said once, felt heavy. It was. Grief and devotion are like wet coats. You wear them until your shoulders bow, and I wore mine silently, never asking for thanks. There was a night, about a year before Paul died, when I found myself scrubbing the grout in the bathroom tiles at 2 a.m. I'd put him to bed early after a particularly hard day. I was exhausted, hands shaking. But I scrubbed anyway, as if clearing mildew could give me control over anything. Our son called the next day, asking about a vacation. Mexico, I think. I don't even remember where anymore. Just that he needed me to watch their dog. I said yes. It wasn't that he never helped. He just never saw. He didn't see what it cost. He didn't see the way Paul sometimes screamed in his sleep. The way I had to help him button his shirts. The way I'd find myself on the bathroom floor some nights, not crying, just sitting. Quietly. They brought takeout on Thanksgiving. No turkey. Just plastic containers and small talk. Sarah complained the house was a little musty. I remember staring at the cranberry sauce and thinking, this is what it becomes. A woman folds herself into corners for decades, and her reward is mildew and plastic forks. Still, I love them. Even when their visit shortened, even when my name was shortened to Gran or Ma, or sometimes nothing at all. I kept loving, because that's what you do, right? You build and pour and stretch yourself wide and thin, trusting that one day someone will wrap you back into the arms you gave. But I was wrong. Paul died quietly, holding my hand. His last breath was a soft exhale, like a tide going out. Our son wept at the funeral. Sarah wore black silk and posted a filtered photo of the bouquet. Rest easy, Dad. And then 3 days later, you can't stay here. As if my home, my life, my history, all of it expired with Paul's death certificate. I think what gutted me most wasn't being asked to leave. It was the way he looked at me when he said it, like I was in the way. Not a mother, not a wife, just an obstacle. I began to notice things small at first, not after the funeral, but long before. A soft shifting of tone, a chill in the way words landed. They didn't cut, not at first. They grazed. Tiny wounds easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. But I was. It started with how they stopped asking, not just about big things, not about Paul's condition or my plans or the money, about anything. They stopped asking what I thought, what I needed, how I was. Sarah would breeze in with grocery bags and relabel my pantry. Just trying to make things easier, she'd say. Easier for who? My son Mark, he would stand beside her like a piece of furniture. Present, silent, unmovable. When I asked him once about dinner plans, he said, "Oh, we figured we'd just eat at home. Sarah already cooked. It was my kitchen. I'd cooked every birthday, every Christmas, every Sunday roast. I had spices in jars with labels I wrote by hand in 1994, and suddenly nothing smelled like home." Then came the mail, letters addressed to occupant, envelopes he never opened in front of me. Conversations cut short when I entered the room. They'd hush like kids caught with matches, but they weren't kids. They were grown enough to orchestrate silence. Once I found a document left open on the table, something about a home equity line. I pretended not to read it, but I did. Later, I asked Mark gently, "Are we behind on anything?" He smiled like I'd told a joke. "It's all taken care of, Mom." I hated that sentence. It's all taken care of. It meant I was no longer part of the solution, no longer even part of the problem, just irrelevant. Meals grew colder, not in temperature, in attention. We used to sit all three of us elbows, touching second helpings, passed without asking. Now they sat close together at one end, their voices low, their phones glowing under the table. They left the dishes. Every time, I didn't complain. I just washed, scrubbed the pans, wiped the crumbs. The faucet, always louder than the silence in the room. Then came the photos. They rearranged the frames in the hallway one day when I was out running an errand. I came home and noticed. Of course I noticed. The photo of Mark at graduation, the one with Paul's arm around his shoulder, both of them laughing, had been replaced. Now it was a canvas print of Sarah and Mark on a beach, barefoot matching linen. The photo of me holding newborn Mark, swollen, exhausted, beaming, had disappeared entirely. I opened the drawer beneath the TV, where we kept spare batteries and tape and odds and ends. I found it there, my face in a frame, face down beneath old remotes. I didn't say a word. There was no point. People think betrayal is a loud thing, that it shouts, slams doors, breaks dishes. But no, betrayal can be a whisper, a glance that doesn't linger, a memory erased from the wall. Even Paul, in his last few months, had started to fade under the weight of their presence. He'd ask, "Where's the boy?" and I'd lie and say at work, even when I knew better. Mark came less often toward the end. He said hospitals made him anxious, that he wanted to remember his father, how he used to be. So I sat beside that hospital bed, alone, day after day, holding the hand of the man who built our life from nothing. I wiped his lips. I turned him gently so he wouldn't stiffen. I whispered poems we used to read aloud. And when he died, it wasn't like a door slamming shut. It was a quiet folding in, like the tide pulling away from shore. I held his face in my hands for a long time after the machine stopped. Mark wasn't there. He arrived 2 hours later, Starbucks in hand. They called while I was on the freeway, he said, almost annoyed. He kissed my cheek like a stranger might. Light, obligatory. Then he asked if the house was in my name. Not are you okay? Not what do you need? Just paperwork. I felt it then deep in my belly, the understanding that something had already died before Paul's heart gave out. Something between me and my son. The moment that changed everything didn't come with thunder. It wasn't a confrontation, no slamming doors or raised voices. It came on a Tuesday, quiet, unremarkable, except that it rewired something inside me forever. I'd been looking for an email confirmation for a medical bill. My laptop was slow, the same one Paul used to update his spreadsheets, still covered in little specks of dried oatmeal and time. I opened the inbox, typed insurance in the search bar, but what came up first wasn't mine. It was a forwarded thread. The subject line read, "Timeline to transition house ownership." I froze. It was from Mark, forwarded to Sarah. I stared at it for a long moment, my finger hovering above the trackpad. Then I clicked. Inside were 3 emails. No greetings, just bullet points. Businesslike. If we wait too long after the funeral, she'll get comfortable again. Leverage grief. She'll be too disoriented to push back. Bring up assisted. Living early. Plant the seed. Emphasize her safety. Make it sound like care. I stopped reading. The room spun. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat there bathed in the dull blue light of the screen, watching my life get downsized in Arial 11-point font. Leverage grief. Leverage. Like I was a variable in an equation, a negotiation point, something to be timed. The email was dated a month before Paul died. They were planning it. While I was spoon-feeding broth to the man I'd loved for 40 years, they were plotting how best to remove me from the home we built together. I reread that one line a dozen times. She'll be too disoriented to push back. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking, my stomach hollow. I got up, slowly, walked to the sink, poured myself a glass of water, and didn't drink it. Something broke in me, not like glass shattering, more like a rope pulled too tight, finally snapping in silence. There was a moment, just a flicker, where I considered calling Mark, demanding an explanation, pleading for the truth behind the words. But then I heard Paul's voice in my memory. "Don't let anyone write your ending for you, Ruth." And just like that, I knew. I wasn't going to ask for anything. I wasn't going to defend my place. I was going to make a decision, my decision. I pulled out the manila folder Paul kept tucked behind the old cookbooks. It held every deed, bill, and contract related to the house. He was meticulous. He taught me to be the same. We'd co-owned the home despite what Mark might have assumed. The paperwork was clear. After Paul, it was mine and mine alone. No one could sell it out from under me, but that didn't mean I had to stay. There's a strange power in realizing you've already been discarded. It frees you. You're no longer waiting to be included, to be chosen. You can finally act without asking. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with Paul's old quilt draped over my shoulders, the stars sharp above the trees, and thought about all the things I never did because I thought I was needed. I could rent the house. I could choose who lived there. I could choose how. I could choose when. And maybe that was the truest inheritance of all, not the house itself, but the ability to decide what it meant. By morning, I had already called a property manager. Her name was Lacey. Her voice was brisk but kind. She came by that afternoon. said the house was in remarkably good shape for its age, asked if I wanted to renovate. I said no. Let them live in it the way it was, with my fingerprints still on the walls. Let them wonder why the drawer sticks, why the bathroom fan hums a certain way, why the lilacs bloom only on one side of the yard. I signed the paperwork the next day. 1-year lease, decent tenants, a quiet couple newly married, no kids, no drama. I called Mark 2 days later, told him I'd made arrangements. I'm renting the house, I said. To who? To people who didn't ask me to leave. Silence. Then, you can't be serious. I'm not staying, I said calmly. You made that clear. I could hear Sarah in the background, a muffled voice, something about plans. It's not your house, Mark. He started to say something, but I hung up. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I breathed all the way in. The apartment I found wasn't grand. It wasn't the kind of place you'd see in a glossy brochure or a retirement magazine with smiling white-haired couples sipping coffee on a patio. It was modest. A second-floor walk-up with thin walls and a narrow view of the street. But it was mine. No one chose it for me. No one whispered about timelines or assisted living brochures. I picked it. I paid for it. And when I turned the key that first morning and stepped inside with a single suitcase and Paul's quilt folded neatly in my arms, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Sovereignty. I didn't furnish it with much. Just a bed, a chair by the window, a small table for meals, and a kettle. I hung one photo, the one they'd taken down, me holding Mark, still swollen and shining from childbirth, wrapped in the kind of joy that doesn't know yet what's coming. I put it by the kitchen sink. I didn't look at it often, just enough. The day the new tenants moved into the house, I took the long way around. I didn't want to be seen, but I wanted to see. They arrived in a small blue car, 2 suitcases, and a coffee maker. She laughed when he struggled with the lock. He kissed her forehead when the door finally opened. I watched from the corner of the block, half hidden behind the trunk of the old elm tree. They didn't know the story of that place. They didn't know that under the kitchen tile was a hairline crack Paul tried to fix 5 times, that the third step on the staircase creaked, no matter how careful you were, that in the master bedroom, if you opened the window just slightly, it whistled like a lullaby. They didn't know, and I didn't need them to. What mattered was that it was no longer his, no longer theirs. It wasn't even mine anymore, not in the same way, but it was free, and I had set it free. Mark called twice that week. I didn't answer. He left one voicemail, short. Mom, I think we need to talk. He didn't say why, didn't apologize, didn't say he missed me. I deleted it. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. I just didn't want his voice in my pocket anymore. I bought myself a teapot, ceramic, deep forest green. It cost more than I normally would spend, but it felt right. I made chamomile. At dusk, sat by the window and listened to the street noises, tires on wet asphalt, the occasional siren laughter, drifting up from a bar 2 blocks over. No one interrupted me. No one moved my things. No one told me I didn't belong. The quiet wasn't empty. It was intact. There were nights when the loneliness pressed close. Of course there were. Grief is like a tide. It recedes, then crashes back when you least expect it. I would sit in that yellow chair by the window and remember Paul's cough, the softness of his hand, the way he'd hum when he read the paper. But there were no shadows of judgment in this space, no half-heard whispers, no planning behind closed doors, just breath, mine. One night, weeks after I moved, I walked to the corner market and saw Mark. He didn't see me. He was coming out with Sarah, holding one of those reusable bags and looking at his phone. I paused across the street. He looked older, tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. The sharpness around his jaw, the same jaw that Paul had looked worn. He laughed at something she said. Not a joyful laugh, a compliance laugh. Polite, practiced. I didn't cross. I didn't call out. I turned and walked the other way. That was the first moment I truly understood I wasn't the only one who had been erased. He had been too. But unlike me, he didn't notice. He was still in the house, metaphorically, still under its weight, still trying to manage something he didn't build and didn't value until it was too late. Let him have it. Let him wrestle with that echo. I have a tea kettle that sings. I have a bed that creaks slightly when I turn over. I have silence that belongs to me and only me. And I have a home, not a house. The difference I've learned is everything. There's something that happens when you stop explaining yourself. The silence isn't heavy anymore. It becomes a border, not a wall, but a boundary. One that says, here is where I end, and you do not get to enter unless I open the gate. It took me weeks to stop narrating things aloud, to stop saying, I'll just leave the light on in case he comes home late, or don't forget to pick up milk. Ruth. Paul was gone. Mark was silent. And for the first time since I was 19, I lived without tending to someone else's breath. I started walking in the mornings, early before the sun crested the roofs, when the pavement was cool and the air smelled like dew and car exhaust. I passed rows of apartments, most windows still dark. There was a florist on 6th that opened early, the scent of cut stems and wet petals wrapped around the sidewalk like an invitation. I bought myself one yellow rose every week, just one. No one to impress, no anniversary to mark, just proof that I was still alive, still capable of choosing beauty. The building superintendent was a quiet woman named Mari, mid-50s maybe, kind eyes, wore her grief in the lines around her mouth. She never asked too many questions, just nodded when we passed in the hallway, and sometimes left a tangerine or a fresh biscuit on my doorstep without a note. I never asked why. I just started doing the same. 2 cups of chamomile, one left outside her door on Tuesdays. It wasn't a friendship, not yet, but it was something softer than solitude. One afternoon, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name. Inside was a card. The handwriting was familiar, tense, masculine. It was from Mark. Mom, I know you're angry. I guess I deserve it. I didn't mean for things to go the way they did. I was scared. We both were. Sarah thought you were struggling. She thought the house was too much for you. I should have talked to you directly. I should have been better. I'm sorry. If you want to talk, I'm here. Maisky marked no signature, no contact number, no acknowledgement of the emails. I held the card between my fingers for a long time. I reread it twice. Then I folded it, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. I didn't respond, not out of spite, but because it wasn't enough. An apology without accountability is just air, and I had learned too late that I could no longer live on air. I sat by my window that evening and watched the sky turn the color of soft peaches. Below, someone's dog barked. A child cried. A couple argued in low voices before falling into quiet laughter. Life moved around me, and I no longer felt like a ghost in it. I didn't know what would happen next. I had no 5-year plan, no tidy vision board. Just this moment, just this chair, just this breath. And that was enough. Later, I lit a single candle, not for memory, but for presence. I didn't pray. I didn't wish. I just sat in the glow alone, without being lonely. That's when I knew something had shifted. They could take the house. They could take the family photos, the hand-me-down dishes, even the narrative, but they could no longer take me. I never imagined that peace could be this quiet. Not dull, not empty, just still. A stillness I had never been allowed. Not as a daughter, not as a wife, and certainly not as a mother. There's a myth women like me grow up with, especially from my generation, that your purpose is only found in your service to others. That the more invisible you become, the more valuable you are. I lived that myth for over 6 decades. I sharpened my silence into virtue. I smiled through being dismissed, made myself smaller to accommodate other people's comfort. I sacrificed and waited for gratitude, for recognition, for reciprocity. But what came back wasn't thanks. It was paperwork, planning, an offhand remark about senior housing spoken over coffee like a casual suggestion. You'd probably be more comfortable somewhere smaller, Mom. They always say comfortable when what they mean is gone. I used to walk through that house, touching everything, light switches, doorknobs, window latches, as if my hands could keep the memories alive, as if my skin could remind the walls who built them. But I've stopped mourning the house. I realize now it wasn't just the physical space they wanted me out of. It was the center. I had always been the axis, the one who remembered birthdays, who cooked the meals, paid the bills, held the stories. When Paul got sick, I carried the weight no one else wanted. And when he was gone, they no longer needed me. Or maybe they did, but not in the way that honors a person, more like a fixture you eventually replace. In my apartment, I don't have to earn my place. No one sighs when I enter the room. No one touches my things. I bought myself a set of towels in robin's egg blue. I chose the color. No one rolled their eyes. I even changed my name on the mailbox to just Ruth. No Mrs. No and family, just me. There's something healing in that. Last Tuesday, I took the bus to the community center. They have a ceramics class for active seniors, though. I'd argue the word active is doing a lot of heavy lifting. I didn't go to mold clay into something beautiful. I went because I wanted to remember what it felt like to make something with my hands, for no one's benefit but my own. The instructor, a young man with paint-splattered shoes and a kind voice, told us to shape whatever we wanted. Don't think, he said. Just move your hands. I closed my eyes and pressed the clay between my palms. I didn't think about Mark. I didn't think about Sarah. I didn't even think about Paul. I thought about that quiet blue chair by the window, the candlelight, the sound of my own heartbeat. I shaped a bowl, small, lopsided, but mine. When it dried, I painted it honey gold and left the rim uneven. I liked it that way. At home, I placed it on the table. I filled it with fresh mint and sea salt. Every morning, I pass it and inhale, a ritual, a reminder. This is my space. This is my air. This is my life. I haven't spoken to Mark since the card, but I did hear through Mari, who is slowly becoming something like a friend, that the couple I rented to has taken great care of the house, that they planted herbs in the back, just like I used to, that they fixed the screen door without asking for a discount. That made me smile. They don't know me, but they tend the space with respect, and that in some way feels like closure. Sometimes I wonder if Mark will show up one day, if he'll wring my buzzer hands, in his pockets, looking older than I remember. Would I let him in? I don't know. What I do know is this: I no longer wait for anyone to come home. I am home. And that quiet strength, the one I mistook all those years for weakness, has finally found a name: me. It's strange how quickly a life can reshape itself once you stop clutching at what refused to hold you back. In the beginning, I thought I'd be counting the days. I imagined marking time the way I did when Paul was in hospice, waiting for the next call, the next need, the next decision to be made for someone else. But days pass differently now. They're not louder, they're not easier, but they're mine. I wake up early, not because anyone needs me to, not because there's breakfast to make or laundry to fold. I wake because the light spills through my curtain in a way that reminds me I'm still here. Sometimes I hum to myself in the kitchen. Paul used to hum too, especially when he was sanding wood in the garage. I don't try to stop remembering him, but I don't chase it either. Grief is no longer a fire. It's a shadow I sit beside when I choose to. I've started keeping a notebook. Nothing fancy, just a lined journal I picked up at the corner shop with a red cloth cover. I don't write poetry, and I'm not interested in memoir. I write what I notice. The way the sky looks before rain. A stranger's laugh in the stairwell. The exact shade of orange the street lamp turns at 6:47 p.m. This morning I wrote, "The quiet is not empty. It is full of what I never had time to hear." Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Paul had outlived me. Would Mark have done the same to him? Would he have been kinder to a father? I used to think sons loved their mothers more. Now I know love without understanding isn't love. It's performance. Mark performed the role of a son on birthdays, on anniversaries, on holidays, when a photo was necessary. But love, real love, is what happens in between. It's in the details, the little ones, like remembering how someone takes their tea, or calling, not just when it's convenient. He hasn't written again, not since that first note, and I haven't reached out. At first, I questioned myself. Am I being cruel, unforgiving? But the truth is, silence is not a weapon in my hands. It's a shelter. I'm not punishing him. I'm protecting myself. The hardest lesson of my life was learning that some people don't return the love you give, not because they're incapable, but because they never saw you as someone separate from what you offered. To Mark, I was comfort. I was stability. I was unpaid labor. But I was never a woman, not one with boundaries, not one with a voice, not one with the right to say no. Until now. Last Thursday, I had dinner with Marie. She brought over lentil soup and warm bread, wrapped in a dish towel that smelled like lavender. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't compare grief. We just sat two women in soft clothes sharing warmth. She laughed at one point, a real laugh, full-throated and unashamed. I hadn't heard that sound in years. And I laughed too, not politely, not as a response. I laughed because something inside me had loosened. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. There's a difference. It's in the way you butter your toast slowly. It's in the way you let your body take up space in a room. It's in how you look out the window and don't rush to move. Sometimes I still catch myself reaching for my phone, imagining a message from Mark, something longer, fuller. But when I remember what he wrote, Sarah thought, the house was too much for you. I remember the invisible ink behind it. We thought you were too much. And maybe I was. Too present, too steady, too unwilling to disappear quietly. I no longer apologize for that. I am a woman who lived through the slow disassembly of her own relevance and chose, finally, to stop begging for a seat at the table. I bought a table of my own, smaller but sturdy. And at this table, I don't need permission to speak. I pour my tea, I break my bread, and I am for the first time in a long time whole. One night, a letter arrived, a real one, not typed, not slick with artificial warmth, a folded piece of cream stationery, my name written in uneven penmanship. It wasn't Mark's handwriting. Inside was a note, short, unsigned. She's pregnant. I thought you should know. No return address, no explanation. My first instinct was disbelief. My second was nausea. And then like a tide pulling in too fast a grief I couldn't name. Not for what I'd lost, but for what would never be mine. I hadn't dared imagine grandchildren, not for a long time. Sarah once told a friend, not realizing I was within earshot, that I would be too much to have around children, that I hovered, that I was the kind of mother-in-law who couldn't help but interfere. She said it softly, like a confession wrapped in a joke. I pretended I hadn't heard, but I remembered, and now the news didn't come from Mark. It came from an anonymous whisper. I didn't cry, not at first. I made tea, though I didn't drink it. I walked the perimeter of my apartment as if it were an ocean and I was circling a shipwreck. I opened my notebook, but couldn't write a single word. She's pregnant, a sentence that should have felt like a beginning. But to me, it was just another wall, another closed door. They wouldn't bring that child to me. They wouldn't let me be part of it. I would not be the one they called Grandma. There would be no in little shoes at my doorstep, no sticky hugs or drawings taped to my fridge. I sat in my yellow chair and looked at the street below. People passed, busy with invisible lives, some in love, some in debt, some in grief, all of them wrapped in their own skin, their own story, and mine. Mine had taken a turn I hadn't seen coming. There's a pain reserved for the living a slow, aching sorrow that doesn't come from death, but from distance. They were alive. I was alive. And yet, we might as well have been different species. I thought about writing to Mark, telling him I knew, offering something a blessing, a suggestion, a simple, I hope she's well. But I didn't. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that caring doesn't always mean returning. Some doors once closed stay closed, and that has to be okay. Instead, I lit a candle, not for them, for the version of me that once would have begged to be part of it. She's gone now, and in her place is someone quieter, wiser, not bitter, just awake. The next day, I went to the bookstore, bought a children's book, a beautiful one full of watercolor illustrations and gentle rhymes. I didn't know why at first. I told myself it was just something to have. But when I got home, I opened it and began to read aloud. To no one, to myself, to the child I'll never hold, not out of longing, out of grace. I read the story slowly, letting each word settle into the space around me. Then I placed the book on my shelf, not to be sent, not to be offered, just to be kept. A reminder, love does not always need to be received to be real. It can exist quietly, even without a home. The hardest part of losing people who are still alive is that the world doesn't grieve with you. There are no casseroles, no hushed condolences, no polite silences. There's only the echo of a relationship you used to inhabit and now must mourn in secret. I thought the distance would get easier. I thought that after enough mornings of untouched mail, Enough weeks without a call, the ache would fade like old wallpaper. But some absences linger, not because you need the person, but because you remember who you were when they still saw you. With Mark, I used to be a lighthouse, the place he ran to, the voice he trusted, the one who made peanut butter sandwiches the exact way he liked crusts, cut diagonally, sliced just enough jelly. Now, I am the shore he avoids. I sometimes dream about him, but it's never the man he is now. It's always the boy, muddy sneakers, gap-toothed smile arms, thrown around my neck with reckless affection. In those dreams, I don't say much. I just hold him. Then I wake up and the room is still. No baby photos, no toys. Just one yellow chair, one teapot, and the faint scent of mint from the bowl I keep near the window. This, I've realized, is not loneliness. It's clarity. For years, I mistook obligation for connection. Now I see it clearly. I was part of a system, not a relationship. I was the backup plan, the reliable one, the emotional garbage bin. If Sarah felt overwhelmed, I absorbed it. If Mark felt caught between roles, I excused it. If they made decisions without me, I forgave it. But forgiveness given too freely becomes something else, a kind of erasure. I don't forgive them now because I have to. I forgive because I no longer want to carry their weight. I've begun to speak more with Mari. We walk together on Thursday evenings. She tells me stories about her sister in Peru, about her mother's stubbornness, about the years she wasted trying to fix people who didn't want to be whole. I told her once about the letter, about the pregnancy. She didn't offer sympathy. She just nodded. You get to grieve, that she said, even if no one sends you flowers for it. That stayed with me. We never give women permission to grieve the invisible things, the relationships that die slowly, the conversations that never happen, the empty chairs at holidays. So I made a list. I titled it, Losses No One Saw. The sound of Mark saying Mom with softness, the feel of Paul's hand finding mine under the dinner table, the way the house used to creak like it was breathing. The sight of my garden in early April, tiny green shoots peeking through. My place at the table, I didn't cry while writing it. I lit a candle and whispered each item aloud like a prayer. Then I folded the page and tucked it into my journal, not to forget, but to honor. Grief, I'm learning, is not something to be cured. It's something to be companioned. It walks beside me now, not dragging, not choking, just there. Like a shadow I've stopped trying to outpace. I think perhaps the greatest act of resistance is to live gently when the world expected you to vanish. To sit in your skin and say, I am still here, even if no one claps, even if no one calls, even if the people you raised forget what you gave them. Still you stay, still you breathe. And in that breath is the proof you are not gone. You are not finished. You are not theirs to discard. Some mornings I still reach for a second mug. It's muscle memory more than hope. I fill the kettle, lay out 2 cups, then catch myself just as the steam begins to rise, and quietly return one to the shelf. I think it's because for so long my life was built in pairs. 2 plates, 2 towels, 2 toothbrushes. Even after Paul died, I moved through the world as if someone else would join me, as if being alone was only temporary, a mistake to be corrected by time or by love or by circumstance. But alone is not a mistake. Alone is just a room you learn how to decorate. I've started filling my apartment with small, deliberate things. A sun catcher in the east-facing window. A tiny glass snail on the bookshelf. a set of linen napkins I'll probably never use, but like to touch. No one rushes me anymore. No one tells me I'm being silly. And in this space, this soft, quiet sanctuary, I have rediscovered the rhythm of my own thoughts. I didn't realize how long I'd been interrupting myself, how many opinions I'd swallowed, how many preferences I'd edited, how many dreams I'd folded and tucked into the drawer labeled later. Later never came, but now is here. Now is drinking tea at 3 p.m. just because the sun looks kind. Now is saying no without guilt. Now is walking slowly down the frozen foods aisle because I want to, not because someone's behind me tapping their foot. I'm not sure when I stopped trying to be palatable. But one day, I looked in the mirror and didn't see the woman who'd waited for approval anymore. I saw someone with lines carved from care eyes that held entire decades of silence and a mouth that no longer asked for permission to speak. I don't need to be liked. I need to be honest. And there is freedom in that. A week ago, I ran into someone from the old neighborhood. Margaret from the book club I stopped attending after Paul got sick. She hugged me too tight and said, "Oh, Ruth, we all thought you moved in with Mark." I smiled. "No, just moved on." She laughed, not quite understanding, invited me to a brunch I won't attend, told me I looked well for someone who's been through so much. I let the words pass, because some people don't need the whole story. They wouldn't believe it anyway, that I lost a husband, then a son, and then finally the illusion that either of those losses would break me. They didn't. They chipped away at the old scaffolding. But what was underneath was stronger than I thought. What remained was me. I've begun writing letters I don't send. One to Paul, one to Mark, one to the version of myself that stayed quiet too long. I keep them in a wooden box near my bed. Maybe one day I'll burn them. Maybe I won't. But writing them matters. It tells me I still have a voice, even if no one listens, especially then. There's a small bakery down the street that sells day-old pastries, half price after 6 p.m. I go there sometimes just for the smell sugar and flour and warm memory. The girl behind the counter always smiles, asks if I want the almond croissant. She's young enough to be my granddaughter. Sometimes I imagine telling her everything about the house, about the sentence, about the silence that followed. But I don't. Instead, I take my croissant, tuck it into a brown paper bag, and whisper, "Thank you." Because what I've learned more than anything is this: you don't have to explain your survival. You just have to live it. It was a Sunday afternoon when I passed by my old street. I hadn't meant to. I'd taken the wrong bus, or the right one, depending on how you look at these things. I stayed on as others filtered off the crowd, thinning until it was just me and an older man carrying a bag of oranges that smelled like summer. When the bus turned onto Ashwood Lane, my breath caught. There it was, the house, my house, or what used to be. The windows had been cleaned, the porch railing repainted. The hedge, the one Paul trimmed religiously every spring, was a bit overgrown now, but blooming. And in the front yard stood a wooden sign staked into the grass, "Yard sale Saturday only," handwritten with a doodle of a smiley face in the corner. It made me laugh unexpectedly, not because it was funny, because it was ordinary. Life was happening there, not ceremony, not tragedy, just life. I pressed my palm to the glass of the bus window and watched as the house receded behind me, smaller and smaller, until it was only a part of the landscape again. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel loss. I felt like I'd once carried something heavy for miles, only to set it down and realize I'd already grown stronger for having borne the weight. The next day, I pulled out Paul's flannel shirt, the soft one, the one he wore when he barbecued or fixed the leaky sink under the kitchen. I'd kept it folded in the bottom drawer all this time. I wore it while sweeping the floor. Let the sleeves roll past my wrists. Let myself imagine for just a moment that he was humming in the next room. Not to make myself sad, but because some ghosts deserve to be visited softly. Later that evening, I sat at my table and ate a bowl of tomato soup with a slice of buttered toast. Nothing elaborate, but good. I set a second napkin on the table, not for anyone, not out of habit, just as a gesture, a nod to the version of me that still loves. I'm not pretending the betrayal didn't hurt. It still catches in my throat, sometimes a word I can't quite swallow. But the pain no longer owns the room. I've made space for something else. Contentment. Not joy, not yet. Joy is a loud guest. But contentment. It moves in quietly, like dusk. It asks nothing. It rearranges nothing. It just wraps its hands around yours and stays. I haven't heard from Mark again. I no longer wait for that. He made his choice. I made mine. And in the absence of reconciliation, I have found something more valuable than apology. Peace. Sometimes I wonder if that's what Paul would have wanted, if he would have told me to fight harder. But then I remember the way he looked at me when I read to him during those last months, not with pity, not with fear, but with gratitude. He knew I'd given everything. And when you know that when you truly know you held nothing back, you don't need others to confirm your worth. You simply carry it forward, like breath, like a flame, cupped in your hand, steady against the wind. I've started volunteering on Thursdays. Nothing big, just a few hours at the library, reading to children whose parents work late. They sit on carpet squares, legs crossed, fingers sticky from whatever snack came before. Some of them fidget, some stare, like the story is stitched into their skin. They don't know me. They don't know what I've lived through. To them, I'm just the woman with the soft voice and the stories that make time pass faster. But when I hold the book, when I turn the pages and see their eyes widen at the part where the dragon roars or the puppy finds its way home, I feel a sliver of something I didn't know I still had. Belonging. Not to them, to myself. Because here I am, not someone's mother, not someone's burden, not someone being measured for usefulness. Here I am, just Ruth, the woman who reads, the woman who remembers every line even without looking, the woman who knows how to make her voice rise and fall like waves holding attention gently between sentences. Sometimes one of the little ones will lean their head on my knee, not asking, just resting. It undoes me in a quiet way, because it's been years since someone touched me without expectation, without strategy, without needing something in return. It's strange how affection can feel foreign, even dangerous, when you've been betrayed by those you gave everything to. Even kindness can feel like a trick. But the children don't play games. They don't scheme. They just look at you like you matter, because in that moment, you do. Last week, a girl named Jasmine slipped me a drawing after story time. It was just stick figures, one tall with glasses, one short with a big smile. She wrote me and you in shaky crayon letters across the top. I thanked her, folded it into my purse, and didn't look at it again until I got home. When I opened it that night, alone in my kitchen, I cried. Not because of what was on the page, but because of how long it had been since anyone saw me, really saw me, not as a placeholder, not as a memory, but as a living, breathing person with something to offer. I pinned the drawing to my refrigerator, right beside the honey gold bowl I made. The two things didn't match. One was messy, one was deliberate, but both were mine, both were real. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Not all children come from you. Some find you later when you need them most." I'm not trying to replace the family I lost. I'm not trying to rewrite the past. But I no longer chase people who walk away. I no longer beg to be loved in a language I don't speak. The love I give, now it has boundaries. It doesn't apologize for existing. It doesn't sit at the edge of a conversation waiting to be invited in. It walks into the room, looks around, and finds its own seat. I still think about Mark. Of course I do. You don't spend a lifetime shaping someone without part of your hands remembering the feel of it. But I've stopped trying to understand him. Some sons love their mothers in a quiet, durable way. Some learn to love only when others teach them how. And some never really learned at all. That's not my fault. That's not my cross. And I refuse to die a little more each day just to carry what he refused to hold. Now I carry lighter things, a book with dog-eared pages, a child's drawing in my purse, a quiet joy I earned inch by inch. Sometimes I wonder what legacy means when your name isn't spoken in the homes you built. I used to think it was heirlooms, the china set. Paul's mother gave us the wedding ring, tucked into a velvet box, the hand-stitched quilt I made one winter when money was tight, and silence hung in the corners like dust. Now I know legacy isn't in what's passed down. It's in what you choose not to carry forward. I no longer carry the fear that silence makes me invisible. I no longer carry the guilt that comes with saying enough. My legacy, if it exists, will be this A woman who was told she was no longer needed and chose to become necessary to herself. There's power in that, not the kind that shouts, the kind that stands. Last month, I spoke at the community center. Mari had organized a Voices of Resilience night, a small gathering of older women who had lived through things no one talks about over dinner. I didn't plan to speak. I went to listen. But then a woman named Angela stood up and shared how her son hadn't spoken to her in 5 years, how he blocked her on social media after she missed a baby shower she was never invited to. She said she still sends birthday cards just in case, even though she doesn't know if they're opened. And something in me cracked open, not in pity, in recognition. So I stood up. My voice shook at first, but I steadied it. "I lost my husband last year," I said. And a few days later, I lost my son. Not to death, but to decision. The room got very still. I told them about the sentence, about the email I found, about how I rented the house, our house to strangers, just so I could reclaim what was left of me. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't cry. I just said what was true. And when I sat down, someone reached for my hand. Afterward, 3 women came up to me, each one with a different version of the same story. He changed after he married her. They decided I wasn't needed anymore. I raised him to be strong. I didn't know that meant strong enough to leave me behind. We are everywhere. We are invisible until we speak. That night I walked home slower than usual, not because I was tired, because I felt full, not with sorrow, with solidarity. I came home, poured a glass of water, and sat in my yellow chair under the soft glow of the lamp. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen not by a son, not by a spouse, but by a room full of women who knew exactly how grief could look like a casserole dish being returned without a thank you. How it could sound like your own name being said with politeness instead of affection. How it could feel like being erased slowly, and still we remain, not as ruins, as witnesses to what was lost, to what we reclaimed, to what we now protect fiercely. I've stopped calling what happened to me a betrayal. It was a revelation. It showed me the difference between obligation and love, between legacy and lineage, between being needed and being wanted. And I've decided I will never again settle for being someone's leftover devotion. It's late now. The city hums below me, soft and distant, a lullaby made of headlights and midnight radio, and someone arguing half-heartedly on a fire escape. I sit in my chair, feet tucked under the kettle, warm beside me. This is the life I have built from what they left behind. It's quieter than I thought it would be, but not hollow. There's a density to solitude I hadn't known before, like the weight of your own breath, finally returning to you after years of holding it for others. Sometimes I wonder if Mark ever drives past the house, if he sees the new porch light, the basil plants blooming on the railing, if he ever slows the car and remembers the sound of my laughter from the kitchen window. But I don't wait for it. The hardest freedom I've earned is this one, the right not to hope. Hope is beautiful, yes, but when you've been discarded, hope can rot. It can trap you in a loop of wishing and forgiving, waiting and shrinking until you forget your own shape. So now instead of hoping he'll come back, I hope for other things, for a soft morning rain, for jasmine blooming near the bus stop, for the sound of my own voice, clear and unflinching, saying no without explanation. I no longer check my phone for messages, but I do check the sky at dusk. I no longer arrange the furniture for guests who never come, but I fluff the pillows for myself. I no longer make space in my mind for apologies I've not received, but I write thank you notes to the version of me who endured, because she, the woman who stayed beside Paul until the end, who packed up her life in silence, who walked away from the very people she made her life for, she is still here, and she deserves to be honored. Last week, I picked up a small wind chime at a second-hand shop. Simple, brass. It tinkles when I open the window. Paul would have liked it. He used to say the wind sounded lonelier without something to play with. Now, when the breeze lifts, it makes a soft song in the corner of the room, not for anyone else, just for me. It doesn't ask for attention. It just sings because it can. And so do I. I sing in small ways, humming while I cook, reading aloud, to no one, writing things I'll never publish. This is not the life I planned, but it's the one I chose. And there's something holy about that. Because when you finally choose yourself, after years of being chosen, last that choice echoes, not in shouts, but in the click of a door you lock behind you, in the softness of clean sheets, in the taste of food you made only for your own mouth. This is my life now, not a consolation prize, not a backup plan, not a waiting room for someone else's approval, just mine. I no longer keep the lights on for someone else to come home. I light them for me. Some nights I sit by the window with the breeze brushing my ankle, and I think of all the versions of myself I've buried gently, not in anger, but in grace. The daughter who obeyed, the wife who served, the mother who waited. They are not gone. They are woven into the woman I am, now one who finally sees her own reflection without asking who she belongs to. Peace came not like a wave, but like a hand resting gently on my back. There are no parades for women who walk away quietly, but we know who we are. We carry our survival in our breath, in our silence, in the rooms we reclaim, one lamp, one chair, one brave, no at a time. And that I now understand is the most dignified kind of freedom. Thanks for listening. If you've ever felt the same, betrayed, discarded, or invisible, leave a comment. Someone will hear you. Don't forget to subscribe. Your voice matters.